Hey there, did you touch money today? Your car door? That taxi seat? Perhaps the elevator? Mouse and keyboard at work? Shake hands with a friend? Your phone? You need Skin Guard hand wash, soap and sanitizer. Stop for a second. Look at your hands. See them? You may have touched coronavirus contaminated surfaces that harbor the virus for several hours. But here's the good news. Use Skin Guard antibacterial hand wash, soap and sanitizer to wash your hands, front, back, between fingers and in your nails. Stay safe with Skin Guard. Skin Guard is a brand of Morbid Products Limited.
Watch the Scientific FinTech Landscape Exhibition live on NTV on the 15th and 16th July 2020 from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. This year's culmination of the 40 Days 40 FinTech initiative is an opportunity to showcase the latest in financial inclusion and interoperability technology, which is unlocking unlimited possibilities for development in health, education, agriculture, e-commerce, and all other sectors. The FinTech Landscape Exhibition is brought to you by High People in partnership with the Cross Lake Technologies, Modest Box, and Modular Foundation. Stay safe by watching this activity live on your NTV screen.
Your Fridays shall never be the same again. DJ Brian has got you covered with the illest skills on the wheels of steel.
Lava silhouette shot. Going to be a chizungu like NTV does it, you know.
Wind the week down with DJ Brian and UGANDA'S as they bring you the hottest mixes in town. On the DJ Mix Show this Friday at 10 p.m. where the party never stops.
Hi, my name is Paul Duke Kaganzi and I work with Duke's Garage. Most of you have had your cars parked for about 3 months, and during this time a lot of things happen to cars that are parked.
The most important thing is to test if your battery works, switching it on, and if your car starts up normally and your battery light, warning light doesn't show, that means you're good to go.
So if your battery is not operational, you will know when you turn your key and it makes a sound, a clicking sound, or it doesn't make any sound at all. If that happens, it will probably be because you did not disconnect the negative terminal of your battery to prepare it for storage. Now what you need to do is get the battery jump started or take it off outrightly, have it charged and get it ready to work. When you look at the tire, you also have to look out for cracks and bulges because those mean that a tire is damaged.
Test the window switches by opening and closing to make sure they all work.
Twedeco, every life matters.
This message was brought to you by Viva Energy and NTV Uganda.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Your Fridays shall never be the same again. DJ Brian has got you covered with the illest skills on the wheels of steel.
Lava silhouette shot. Going to be a chizungu like NTV does it, you know.
Wind the week down with DJ Brian and UGANDA'S as they bring you the hottest mixes in town. On the DJ Mix Show this Friday
Me I go move to the girl. Me I must move to the girl. Let's go
at 10 p.m. where the party never stops.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
At NTV and the leaders. I think 2 days ago we had Dr. Kizabesije who said, yeah, it might be true that we get the leaders we deserve. So are we a generation that has the leaders we actually deserve? Talking about this whole discussion of leadership, where we have failed, where we have gone right. It can't all be so bad. The former Assistant Bishop of Kampala has also been on part of the conversations to do with leadership in this country. The Right Reverend Dr. Zach Nirinji, who I should just say this to get it out of the way, but this is not going to be a biased conversation, but this man is Anu married me and my husband. Good morning, Bishop.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Totally delighted.
Yes.
Totally. And it's okay to say congratulations.
Yes.
Because you've got a baby, bouncing.
Thank you,
You're
Bishop.
a mother. Hallelujah.
It's very surreal to have such conversations with you, but we
We'll
must.
manage.
Leadership. You and I were having a discussion off air saying that you said our generation, and I said your generation failed us when it comes to leadership because you didn't train our generation so well. So if we have anything failing in this generation, then it's the generation of our parents and maybe their parents. But before we get into dissecting that, today if you were to look generally at the leaders we have from top to bottom, what is your thought? What is your general thought of the leadership we have in this country?
We do have a comprehensive, a total leadership crisis. Total. And that, I mean, it's manifested in all sections of society. In politics, it's the most obvious.
Yes.
You know, it's just tragic. It's unbelievable. The evidence is overwhelming. You can check in parliament, you can check, you know, in cabinet, you can check, you know, you can check the quality of our political leadership. It's a crisis, massive crisis. Yeah, absolutely.
When you say a crisis,
I'm coming.
Is that okay?
It's a moral crisis.
Yes.
Let's put it that
moral.
way. It's a moral crisis. It's an ethical crisis.
Yes.
We have a leadership that doesn't seem to embody values that build society, that build a people that cohere, that make sense to life together as a people. You know, it's a moral crisis. Within the political leadership, it's a political moral crisis because we have a political leadership that seems to have no public values, values that engage society in a way in which society not only coheres, a way in which society is together, but society can move forward. And as I argue, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed all that. It's just brought it all to the fore. But it's the same thing in the church. Absolutely. The quality of the episcopal leadership, that's bishops, apostles, that level of leadership, pastors, clergy, and I mean, that too is a real crisis because you are asking, do the churches, the pastors, bishops, clergy, have they been teaching what it means to have a good life? By a good life, the tragedy today is a good life means things. You have a lot of things.
Material.
But the whole idea of values, we are a country that is certainly deeply, deeply religious.
Yes.
The last time I checked, 99% of this country would say they subscribe to a form of faith. You know, Christianity, Islam, or other. Now, 85% will say they are Christian. So I said to people, therefore it means that in this country, the problem is actually Christianity. Because if the thing is not working, and yet we say this is a, you know, the majority of the population are Christian, that therefore means Christianity is not working. There must be something drastically wrong with the form of Christianity in this country. That is to therefore say there must be something drastically wrong with the quality of the pastoral, ecclesiastical leadership in this country. And those of us who lead in those spaces must take responsibility.
Absolutely.
We can say that of our cultural leadership because our cultural communities, whether it's Bafumbira or Banyankore or Baganda or Acholi or Iteso, those different ethnic cultural communities, it's just not working. We don't seem to be able to, so there is something wrong within what's happened to our values of our different cultures. What happened to Ubuntu? I've been trying to talk to my friends from the lower communities what the equivalent of Ubuntu is, you know. Really, what's really happened is Ubuntu has died. You know, it's not evident in the way we relate to each other. I mean, you see the LDUs battering people, and beyond the politics of it, you've got to ask yourself: this LDU person, this soldier, policeman,
as an individual,
battering another fellow human being in the way they do it, you must wonder what is it that informs who they are as people. So. I can speak therefore about and so we must also ask what happened in our families, because each one of us is coming from
a political, church, a cultural. Then
what happened to our families?
Unit. Yes,
you know, what kind of families are coming from whom these people are coming? You know, so there is something that has happened to the family. The word to use is these are called meaning-making centers in society. It's the centers in which people make meaning about life. What happened to our education system? Because the education system is another place where people begin to be nurtured, their values. So the education system, so we must really interrogate our families. We must interrogate, therefore, parenting.
Is that where we should? Is that where we should start? Because if you're building a good lead, ideally it starts at home. So if we're going to blame every other category, church, aren't we going to start by blaming the family unit?
I actually wouldn't use the word blame.
Okay.
I think rather we talk about taking responsibility.
Right.
You know, taking responsibility. Because it's not a blame game. We are all in this together.
But the responsibility then go back to the family unit.
No, actually, it's not just the family. It's, let me put it this way. This is where the leadership conversation is crucial. Leadership creates culture.
Okay.
Leadership creates culture. That's why we must go back to leadership.
Yes.
So if we are discussing the family, we want to discuss the leadership in the family.
Okay.
We therefore want to discuss the nature of parenting. So let's begin there if you want to.
Yes.
Who parented your generation? All right?
Yes.
Let's discuss.
So we're putting our parents.
Yeah.
Now.
Let's discuss your parents. First of all, I think we've got to acknowledge that your generation, you are children of the generation of many who passed the late 1980s and the early 1990s, which is when you guys were born and were growing up in the 1990s, you know, went to school in the decades of 2000, right?
Yes.
Too many people died of my generation due to HIV and AIDS.
Yes.
So we actually have a very large proportion of your generation that didn't grow up with either both parents or one of the parents.
Yes.
So single parents, you and I were discussing this, not by choice, but crisis, tragedy. We also have, remember in the 1980s, particularly as I'm thinking about the central region and northern, especially northern and central, the wars in those regions killed so many people. And the casualty of those wars were especially men.
So a big part of my generation doesn't have a father.
Absolutely.
At least, yes.
Absolutely. That is very true. So it's a generation that grew up. Also, so the whole, the crisis of parenting or the absence of it. So hustling. So growing up with a single mother or growing up with uncles who themselves are hustling and all that whole stepmother challenges, all those questions. So your generation grew up really in a crisis of parenting because of the nature of our societies. And that is where we go back to politics. Okay. Let's not make a distinction. Our lives are shaped by any political dispensation that happens.
Yes, the decisions, yes.
Absolutely. Why was the whole of northern Uganda and eastern Uganda locked out of progress for over 20 years? It's politics, it's warmongers,
governance,
it's,
yes.
it's leaders who think that the only way to govern society is using guns and so on. The same thing with the entire Buganda region from much longer, absolutely. By the way, the other thing to acknowledge is that therefore during those times, some of our best brains fled this country. So too many of my generation who are not here, you know, they fled the country. You hear about the Boston Ugandan community or the Sweden Ugandan community, or there's a huge Acholi community in the UK. The best of our brains had to flee because of these issues. So we therefore had also a challenge in our society that we are not able to keep our best. Why? Because of this politics. So back to that parenting, So you have children growing up literally in with parents who are traumatized by a political, social context that wasn't working. I can tell you, growing up in the 1980s, it was very difficult to dream, very difficult to dream.
And are you more concerned about survival more than, oh, I must train my child to become something? Because if a single mother is by no choice, obviously, she's more concerned about the next day and the next. Yes. Can
I tell you, growing my kids in the 80s, it was very clear, milk is for children.
Oh,
you know?
Okay.
This is where this whole thing called dry tea, that's where it came from. How can you have tea that is dry? That's where it came from. So I am going to have
milk
dry
is
tea.
A luxury.
Because milk was a luxury.
Yeah.
You know, it's awful. So those parents, now, thankfully, and this is where it is very crucial, thankfully, the rural communities in some areas of this country remained pretty much fairly intact.
Yeah.
So you had maybe better parenting within the rural communities, but those rural communities were not educated. And then the schools we send our children to, you guys went to, the privatization of education became a phenomenon in the 1990s. Yes. And the education, therefore, was not for life and society. It became a business.
Yes.
Right? A huge business. So teachers, I mean, when I was growing up as a young lad, we looked forward to teachers as models in society, right?
Yes.
Later, teaching becomes the most despised job. In fact, the people offering for teaching are people who failed to make it to university sometimes, or failed to do the subjects they wanted. I can still recall when I offered to do education, you know, this is in the 1970s, I was scoffed at. How can you be the brightest, one of the brightest students?
And then want to be a teacher.
How can you be one of the brightest students from Untitled School and want to become a teacher, you know? But that has even become much worse in the 1990s. So the other question is, who were your teachers? They were people who entered teaching not because they longed to, but because they had failed.
It was the
to
only
make
other
it
thing they could
absolutely
do.
So all of that, you have therefore a crisis in parenting, you have a crisis in teaching and education that these parents are having to deal with, and it's that in which you are growing up.
We're having a conversation on who is preparing the young people for leadership, but based on Bishop's description of it, and it worries me because I thought it was something we could press a button to and change, but clearly we can't.
So let me tell you who is prepared, who has prepared
this generation of leaders
that are offering themselves
as leaders, yes,
in this unbelievable election.
Yes.
They were formed by the school system I have just described.
Yes.
So Makerere at the time, let's even discuss Makerere. What kind of Makerere was it? First of all, too many of the really professors who became professors in the early 90s, who had to become professors because they showed something for it, too many of them either passed, a number of others left for green pastures. Yes. So the quality of teaching. Then you had an explosion, the numbers. You know, I can still recall a friend of mine telling me about their economics class, 800 students. They used to meet in the main hall. So teaching itself. So these are the students who are being helped to do exams in by Wandegea. You know, those centers of, and I think the evidence you can see is that every time there's an election, there is a challenge about the qualifications of the MP. Right?
Not one, not two.
Not one, not two. It's a crisis. Now, these are people who cheated in P7 exams. This whole thing of cheating became a culture. They cheated in P7. They cheated in S4.
And
they get into the university and they are cheating as well. All right? And so they enter leadership as cheats. So it shouldn't surprise you that corruption is the only way things happen in this country. So your generation are drinking waters of corruption. That's what you've been nurtured to. What's the evidence? That any young person offers themselves in this election is ample evidence that they have no values. What I would have expected young people, your generation, to say, hey, we can't enter this kind of election because it's not an election. It completely collapses on all the standards of election. But the fact that they can offer themselves in this that is clear and not says to you that there is something within who they are. It's the school system that I can discuss with you. It's the parenting system. That's what has nurtured them. You know, the school, the family, the school, and then the political dispensation.
Before we go to that, I remember Dr. Alex Awiti did some research years ago, and they were saying that when it comes to corruption, young people said that they were most likely to take a bribe because they think it's okay. They've seen the people before them take a bribe. Not because they want to take the bribe and they ask for it, but they're saying, if so-and-so has done it before, I feel okay to also do it.
Let me tell you a story. I have a friend of mine who was a teacher at the university, at Makerere. And a daughter, one of the students, a young woman, had cheated exams and falsified, exams.
Yes.
And she was caught, red-handed. And the administrator said, it's obvious, the rules are clear, the disciplinary actions are clear, you'll be discontinued.
Yes.
And the young lady goes to, of course, her parents and reports the situation.
Yes.
And the next thing, this is my friend telling me the story, is in the office, is one of those making these decisions. It's a parent and the daughter, they are walking into his office. And the parent is pleading for the daughter.
To stay.
To stay. And
to clip the system.
To stay in the university.
The system is clear.
Yeah, yeah.
The rules are clear.
The rules are very clear.
But please,
can we talk about this? No, can we talk about this?
We can fix this.
Can we talk about this? And my friend says, the lecturer, but how can we, what do we talk about?
Yes.
It's obvious, it's clear. And the gentleman says, no, we can talk. We can talk. So he pulls an envelope, a brown envelope. And the daughter is watching this happening.
Yes.
Pulls a brown envelope. And the man says, so what is this? She says, no, we can talk. We can talk.
And she's watching.
And she's watching.
So if this is the next generation of leaders, they've seen what they're supposed to be doing. So it doesn't matter what you will say, actually. Because
no. So let me say this. Values are caught. Values are not taught.
Really?
No.
We've sung this for so many times, that values are actually taught.
No. Values are caught. People don't learn what they hear. They learn what they see. The thing that changes people is not what they hear in class or in church sermons. When people are listening to Bishop Zach Niringe, they are watching his life.
Yes.
And if Bishop Zach Niringe's life is what he says contradicts who he is, people will actually believe who he is rather than what he says.
and I think we're going to take a short break, but I want you to think on the fact that someone said we applauded when we're having the parliament that we have today, that they were so young and great, and it's a good example because we're seeing young people take up leadership, which has failed miserably, clearly.
Because those young people came through cheating. I told you, they drank waters that are soiled.
By corruption.
By corruption. That's what you're seeing. When you have, so let me repeat this. It's crucial. Leadership creates culture. The values people live by are the values they assimilate through these meaning-making centers of life. The family, the school, the wider society, the culture, the political system. the political system. I still can remember during those days when it was required that every young person coming through, you know, after senior 6, they must do muchaka muchaka. You remember those
Yes,
muchaka
yes,
muchaka
before
days?
university.
These big issues, you know. People were being trained. One of the main training was military means. You know, the idea then was we must demystify the gun.
Yes.
Oh, let's put the gun in everybody's hands. But what are you suggesting? You are actually suggesting that people must learn how to use means of violence
As an answer.
as an answer to how you live in society. So fast forward that we have a very violent society is the fruit that we are harvesting for investing in violence as a people and as a society. That therefore you have a parliament in which violence is visible. That you have a military can attack parliament, and the Speaker of Parliament actually has another session after that. Because violence has been normalized in our society. Why? Because the gun and violent means. So you talk about violence in the family. We're talking about gender-based violence. It's massive. So the question we've got to ask is, how did violence become normalized in our society? You've got to go back to our social and political systems and what they have done to us.
Okay, we're discussing on who is preparing young people for leadership, but of course you can't start who without knowing how we've failed. And as the bishop started this conversation in the beginning, said it's a crisis. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
You're watching Morning at NTV, and just before the break, we were having a conversation on who is shaping our leaders, young leaders. Although it really isn't who, because before you discuss who it is, or you can't discuss who it is, just that you have to look at all the different aspects of how we, who end up being leaders, actually grow up. So it starts from the family, the community, and then everybody else, the church, the school, even, yes, the education system was actually a big discussion on it. But you also discussed the church, which you ideally belong to, and you're being honest and saying we're lacking the values of leadership. But instead of poking at the leaders we have today in church, I think it's interesting that we go back to the generation of parents that we had and the families that we grew up in. I would say, isn't there a percentage in all of us, Bishop, that yes, your parents instill in you ABC, but eventually you go and find your own way?
You do, but you know, it's actually, it's interesting. The way you find your way in school. If you just think about the values and why you began to dream what you dream, it's what you encountered.
Yes.
It's what you encountered.
Which could be beyond my family.
No, absolutely.
Yes.
So it can be beyond your family, but so let's identify those spaces, those encounters in life that shape values, aspirations, hopes and dreams, you know. And we talked about the family. Absolutely. Remember the point I make? Values are quote, not taught. The place where values are quote, the family. It's one. The second place is the education system, the school. Please remember, the little boy, the little girl that you were, spent much more quality time in school. Every time you're going to go home, it's homework, it's, you know, and so on. So what is happening in our school system definitely matters. Then, absolutely, the church.
Do you know why I say that? Just to cut you short there. When we were growing up, there was a generation of leaders who, if somebody offered themselves as a leader, to be a leader, there was always that saying of, I always knew so-and-so would become a leader. We could see it from when they were young. Today, we're shocked when somebody offers themselves for leader because maybe you didn't see that coming. You didn't see the traits in them.
Because the way society, the language to use is a predator society. We created a society that kills its own children. A society that eats up its own young. So predator animals are this kind. Predator animals are animals that when there is no food, their meat, they actually eat their children. That's the kind of society we've created. So it's a society that literally kills its own. And the easiest place to check is politics. You know, you see how the political system we've created eats up its own, it munches them, you know. But also the society, so the surprise you are, it's not a society that grooms, that nurtures. Let me give you why church is important. In the 1990s, a movement emerged that talked about miracles, you know. So we have Miracle Center, we have Catch Your Miracle, all those miracle things, and how you need a special moment with God, you know, to zap you for the next day, you know. So religion became a fix-it miracle. So people enter, so religion wasn't about the values of generosity, of kindness, of compassion. It was very consumerist.
Yes.
Surprise, surprise. Have you noticed how people think life is a miracle? So, typical prayer groups today, what kinds of things are people praying for? People are praying for jobs. People are praying for success. People are praying to make more money. You don't make money by prayer. No. It's hard work.
Hard work.
What do you pray for? Hard work. Not for more money. But people are praying for
money.
And have you had this movement where people are praying to capture a job? You know, they're even very fragile, you know? So, that says to you, even faith became very consumerist, very, very predatory. Oh, it's unbelievable. So, that's where the church also comes in. What did we teach faith is all about? It's not about community. It's about myself. It's about how I beat the other, you know, to being in the first lane, you know. So all of these places infuse into you what it is you hope to become. And then, so it's not one thing. We make a mistake. Society is very much interconnected because we all grow up in our families, we grow up in our wider society, which is the school, we grow up in church, we grow up watching our political leaders, we grow up watching those that, and they really create vision, inspiration, or lack of it. We begin to aspire to look like them. So if you go to the villages, who are the people with the biggest houses? You understand? The villages. Who are the people with the biggest houses? So people check in their minds, how did they make their money? The people with the biggest houses in our villages are politicians. How did they make their money? Through politics. The reason why you are having a complete interest in politics
is because I want to be like the rich man in the village. I
want to be like the rich man in the village who made his money through politics. And even the businessmen who have money in this country are politically connected. So there is a mindset in this country that in order to make it, you must be politically connected.
So are you saying that what we used to look at leadership as, we used to tread carefully in trying to attain it?
Yes.
Whereas now it's been watered down, that we don't value leadership?
You don't just become a leader. You must embody something that you add value to society. But now, no. Leadership is about me. You know, is about how much I can amass. Right? I mean, I have seen these amazing people in parliament. Some of them were primary school teachers, and I have nothing against that. Some of them were, and suddenly people were earning 500,000, are earning millions.
Yes.
Right? You know how they get it? They sell their goods. You know, the commercialization of politics that has become the normal is precisely because of what we made leadership to be. But the way that became is because of who our leaders became.
Yes.
We have very few role models. So the challenge we have as a country, as a society, is how do we promote those within our leadership, because they are there actually. Let me put it that way. They are actually good.
There are some good apples.
Oh, there are some good apples. They are there in church. They are there as I mean, I was watching television the other day, and the teachers who were teaching mathematics, and I love maths. You know, by the way, talking about education, the day people started failing to do mathematics in our school system is the evidence that the education system was dying.
No
because
way, Bishop.
I'm very serious. If an education system cannot teach mathematics, that system is not going to produce the future. I can say that to you. Absolutely. Everything in the world is mathematical. Everything. Just think about your body. Very mathematical. Symmetry. Everything in the world, look at this table, is mathematical.
Yeah.
And if people don't understand the logic of mathematics, so the fact that people
We
started...
lacked good teachers, clearly, to break down things like that. Because I'm looking back at my math background and I'm like, I lacked a good teacher, clearly.
No, absolutely. But you see, one of the reasons is once we devalued education, once this country, one of the tragic things that General Museveni ever said and his team was when they told publicly, education is not our priority. I still remember this. Education is not our priority.
That was the start of all our problems.
My God.
Are you trying to say it's easy as, okay, if that's where we failed, then if we're fixing, just fix the education?
If we don't fix our education system, we don't have a future. If we don't fix but how do we do it? So when I say that to draw a country in a fraud called an election is a perpetuation of fraud as a way of managing society, people learn. People learn that you don't have to play by the rules. Because if the leaders are breaking the rules, please forgive me, I'm one of those who've been saying to my dear sister, a wonderful sister in the Lord, she's done amazing things in this COVID-19 fight. Absolutely wonderful, remarkable. But one of the ways the Minister of Health could act to show that she takes seriously values is that now that you have failed the standard that you have set, the best thing you do is, I step down. You see, that we need to see that of our leadership. When leaders acknowledge
I'm glad
where
you
we
used
have
her as
failed.
an example, because maybe that can help us see it this way. Let's call it a mistake that happened, right? Does not devalue Dr. Jane Ruth
No,
as a leader.
No. Actually, there are fatal mistakes for us as leaders.
Yes.
There are mistakes we make that are simply fatal, that negate
all the
anything,
good?
everything good. No, it doesn't negate all the good. How do you redeem the good? How do you redeem the good?
But if you're saying resign...
No, wait a moment. Yeah. To resign is to say, I have failed on this standard. It does not say that it's the end of the world. No. For her to stop being a minister is not the end of the world. It's not the end of her leadership. In fact, she shows herself to be a remarkable leader by acknowledging, by presenting herself before Parliament to say, or any other authorities, guys, I have failed. I made a mistake. I have made mistakes in my life, my sister. All right? I'm human. Some private, others public. When a leader makes public mistakes, she is publicly accountable.
Yes.
The point I'm making is this. It's one of the greatest signs of leadership is to acknowledge error.
I was about to say that. We don't see that many leaders acknowledge they're wrong.
No.
There's a culture of trying to do PR in leadership.
Yeah. So, when she then started explaining, I was distributing masks, and then the videos come. The best thing is to say, I erred. I submit myself to the appointing authority or to this country to say, what therefore do you do with me as your leader? Because I'm your leader. See, people say you are our leader. Let me put it differently. Anytime somebody says, I am your leader, they are imposing themselves. People must say you are our leader.
Okay.
And if people say you are no longer our leader,
then you're not.
Then you're not. Then you must say, okay, thank you very much. It does not mean that you are finished. But actually, we talk about redemption. Let's talk about marriage. Yeah? We make mistakes in marriage.
Yes.
What is it that redeems a mistake, an error, a sin? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Please forgive me. Forgive me. And if you don't learn, forgive me. If you don't learn taking responsibility, one of the most significant qualities in leadership that's lacking today is humility. Humility.
Okay, humility can be shown. I always say that some examples are great, but they have to be at a certain scale to have a certain amount of influence. Let's say an RDC somewhere resigned because of a mistake they made and was very commendable and was very well understood. It might not have the same influence to change the mindsets as if, say, a vice president said, I made a mistake, and I'm stepping down. Do you believe that certain leaders in certain positions have a bigger responsibility to show us more than others?
We all act within the spaces which
with
we
the spaces we have, yes.
So a parent has the responsibility
On
to
their
teach.
end,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm sorry. You know, when I was growing up,
Although
as-
that's a
let
whole
me-
other
let me say-
discussion. Parents don't apologize.
No, but that's the point. That's what I was going to say
Yeah.
to you. That growing up, you know, a saved man, Christian, and so on,
Yeah.
we were being told that if a husband and wife are going to quarrel, go and quarrel in the bedroom. Don't show it to the
To
children.
the children, yeah.
What a false teaching. It was terrible.
Really?
Oh, yeah, it's false. Because quarreling is very spontaneous.
It can happen at any point.
And when you, as a parent, disappear to the bedroom and the children are seeing things are not good, and then you disappear to the bedroom, the children begin to guess, okay, what's dad and mom doing? They had just started a quarrel here.
Then they
What are
disappeared.
Then they disappear in the bedroom. Then you come back from the bedroom looking very nice. And the children are like, something is wrong here. What we should have been told is, you say a bad word to your wife, you say a nasty thing to your husband, the children are hearing, that's not disaster. Actually, what the children need to hear is how you unmake that. Is for you to come back and say, again publicly in that public of the home,
How do you fix it?
darling, I'm sorry. I messed up. I did this. The children need to hear it. You know? I still can remember this. Our daughter, remarkable. She had done something wrong at school, and then she came home, and I was very angry, you know, and I beat her hard. And she's sharp. So she said, later she came
Let
back.
the anger simmer?
Simmer. She comes back to me, and she says, Dad, you beat me, and you beat me very hard. I know I made a mistake. But Daddy, did you need to beat me that hard?
For me to understand.
Really? Did I deserve that wrath? And you know, I had to say, Abigail, please forgive me. I overdid it. I was dealing with my anger, not disciplining you. So yes, if the children don't hear it in the home, so we talked about the home. Humility is not learned just out, it's learned in the home. Humility is learned, as I said, in the school system. You know? By the way, values of probity, if our teachers are extravagant, I see today teachers are borrowing money right, left, and center to do this, and the children are saying, okay, where does the teacher get his money from? Where does the head, you know, and so on. So probity is learned also in the school. So let's go to the church. Are our pastors humble people?
Ooh.
You know, our pastors are, ooh, look at me, you know, and you have, you know, this whole Mbonye phenomenon.
We're
Tragic.
We're lacking humility, but
I could go back.
Yeah,
then we go to our political class.
Yes.
So all these centers teach you. So back to my dear sister, you know, remarkable leadership she's provided. But now that you have faltered here, humility demands submit yourself and say, I actually flouted my own rules.
And
It's
I can no longer do
evident.
the job?
And I can't blame the people who are celebrating me. Because if you are a leader and you don't know how to manage public, she's saying too much. She's just saying to us how unable she was to manage that moment. That means you can't really lead a wider community and so. So all I'm saying, humility would be. So imagine if we had, you know, the day when our president said everybody must have masks, and we're not going to open the country because we're going to distribute everybody how many millions of masks? It would have been wonderful for the president, the next political address, to say, I actually got it wrong.
We don't have enough masks.
We don't have enough masks. Wait a moment. The industries are not working. I promised you what I can't deliver. And this is what we are trying to do to unmake it. But now, if you don't do that, everybody learns, apology is not a sign of strength. To say sorry
it's weakness.
is weakness. And so people begin to work. So we have a leadership class that doesn't understand humility, that doesn't understand service. Service above self. We don't learn it in our homes, we don't learn it in school, we don't learn it in our...
I need to ask you, because I don't want us to wind up without asking this question, especially when you mentioned the Minister of Health. The question of gender, you know, I am growing up as a girl being told girls do this, boys do this. Then you grow up eventually, these roles are for men, these roles are for women. So in nurturing leaders, especially young women who might think, oh no, those roles are for men, these roles are for women. And then you have the clash of what would be the feminist world or the world that is telling them, no, 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 get a seat at the table, fight for your rights. Do you believe, because you've got a daughter, you've been discussing about your daughter, have we nurtured or have we shaped women to also feel like there's a seat at the table? Is there a seat at the table for them in the first place?
I will tell you. Remember, we've nurtured a society that has become violent. And men are generally the purveyors of violence. Men, violence is a quality of, and it's very tragic because our boys are grown, mature, you know, violent. So violence
this
is
what
ingrained.
Makes you a man.
Yes, violence as a quality of our society is very sad. I tell you what else is very sad in our society is that we have nurtured not service but consumerism, acquisition of, you know, all of that. All of that has worked against our gender relationships. And I talk about gender relationships rather than worked against women.
Yeah.
Because when anything works against women, it's working against men. We've got to remember that. If anything works against my mother, it's working against me. If anything works against my wife, I have 2 amazing daughters. So if anything, so we must talk more gender relations. That's what has been damaged. And so, tragic, we created the feminist movement, and the way in which this women emancipation happened in this country was competitive. You know, women have, you know, we created a structure of competition between men and women rather than structures of complementarity. And how do we complement each other in the political sphere, in the work sphere, as we must do in the family? Because marriage is primarily about companionship. It's not about, I hear, it is tragic, this whole teaching about women must submit to men. Okay, provided you read, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So the tragedy is our pastors love to teach women submit to men, but they have not taught how men submit to women as people in Christ. Submit to one another is before the women are told to submit. So the first thing is we must learn this mutuality. Our society hasn't created it because we love violence, we love guns, we love money, we don't love society, community, we don't love education. Goods. You know, we really have we have and the primary reason for this is leadership. Why are we where we are? It's leadership. And I would like us to go back to the way in which we normalized violence, the way we normalized lies, when a president, a prime minister, a speaker, a bishop, an archbishop, whoever tells lies, does not come back to say, I told a lie, but justifies that lie. It becomes a norm in society. When a culture is violent in the way it deals with whether it's women or anybody, it becomes the norm. So back to the question you raised about gender relations, is that very, very sadly, we created this competitive, and so it's not working. And so men want to bring down women, women want to bring down men. It's not this sense of,
because in a game of competition, everybody plays with what the strength they have. I hear you, and that's very key. That we're
instead of recognizing that we definitely, as a community, how can you not have women playing their roles as leaders? Because the thing that women bring into society is nurture, is mother. They're the people who care most. You know, men think you must take your space through violence. Women understand that's not the way it happens. You know, so. But can we understand what the strengths are, the complementarity? So
it's not competition, it's
not competition. It's not competition. It's how do we make this work together for us? So you are right. Women have been shoved into a way of acting that kills women. Do I need to give you stories? Kills women. But also this doesn't work for men. It kills men.
As you said, you can't raise one without the other.
It's a predator system. It kills. It munches its own.
I hear you. That's been a conversation on how the society and everything else included has actually shaped the leaders that we have today. And actually the question in the beginning was, who is shaping the leaders, the young leaders that we have today? And the conversation was with the former Assistant Bishop of Kampala, the Right Reverend Dr. Bishop Zach Nidinji. And as I said in the beginning, there's a bias here in this relationship, but always good to see.
But I really hope nobody misses the fact that we are in a crisis.
You said that in the beginning.
Yeah,
And you said
it's a
moral...
It's a moral
crisis.
crisis. Within our politics, it's a political moral crisis that people are rushing into a fraud called a scientific election.
I didn't ask you, should it be who will fix it? And you're going to say all of us.
Actually, it begins
the responsibility
it begins with the various power centers recognizing the crisis and making a choice to fix it.
And the power centers is?
So there is the political power centers.
Yes.
So Parliament, but Parliament is lost, completely lost.
Okay.
The cabinet is totally lost. We don't have anything. So the churches, you know, I've been decrying the absence of the leadership of the elders. You know, the National Elders Forum.
Yes.
I've been decrying the absence of the Interreligious Council. To be able to say sanity, we are entering what we can't manage as a country. Let's stop. Remember the IRCU pleaded for a national dialogue. We don't hear it. I don't know what's happened to them. And you see, that's the failure of our religious leadership, to keep focused on the things that work for this society, you know. And now everybody's scientific revolution. Rubbish. It can't work. If you can't manage elections, which are open and so on, how do you manage things in radios that we don't even, now we've been promised 10 million radios. You can't produce food for Kampala. You can manage. So we need those influencers in our society.
The voices that
The
should
voices.
speak, yes.
So we need that now. My appeal is to all of us to recognize there is a crisis. We must fix it. Those of us with the location and responsibility and positions in society, we must take responsibility to say, let's fix it.
Absolutely.
So whether it's Parliament, do your work. Now, if you prove yourself to continue to be who you are,
everybody in the church do the
let's
work,
see
the schools,
the faith leadership speak hope into this country. And by speaking hope, it is to point out the things that we must do. You know, let us hear it from the teachers. The fact that UNATU is saying nothing about the management of how teachers are. Teachers are very desperate, you know, but we need to hear this from the trade unions. You know, they need to speak sanity into this, not selfishness. We need to hear voices. The elders, please, those of us in our 60s and 70s, speak sanity to this country. Be elders. You know, I see my friends who are in their 70s in cabinet wanting this job. And I say, please, step down.
Let the young people take this
No, step down so you can be the voice of sanity.
Absolutely.
You know, the generation who came into power in the 80s, step down. Be leaders. Be elders in our society.
Thank you so much, Bishop Zach Nidinji. Never mincing words. And that's it for Morning at NTV.